Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Joining us on our game day segment in just a moment will be football beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Before that, let's get it rolling with a few of my thoughts this week. It's been a long winter, and since the bowl game, other than recruiting news, we really haven't talked much football. We'll change that for the next few weeks and spend the rest of the month discussing spring practice news. Of course, much has changed since the end of the season. Coach Gattis is our new offensive coordinator, and Jim has given him the keys to the offensive kingdom, so to speak. The offense is being installed this spring, and from what we hear, the players really do love it. There have been other coaching changes and more than a few injuries this winter. Jim has been more accessible to the media so far, and he's even been sharing depth charts, something I don't think he's ever done the last 4 years. There is a lot of work being done behind closed doors, and a lot of position battles are taking place. That's what spring is for. On Saturday, we had an open practice, which is also not something we've seen a lot of in the past. My guest today said the fan turnout was light on what was a beautiful weather day, and it was just good to have football back, even if it was watching a controlled practice. Joining us next on our game day segment is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive, here on the Michigan Man, in partnership with our friends at SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Here with us on our game day segment this week, as we spend some time talking Michigan football, beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Great to get you back on, Aaron.
It's good to be back, Mike. Football season is getting close.
Well, it is. And April, as you know and I know and fans know, can be a very frustrating month, spring football practice, because we don't really get a lot of information or even have a good idea what we're going to see in the fall. But Saturday's practice was open to the public, something a little bit different for Jim Harbaugh and his program. Was there a pretty decent fan turnout for that, Aaron?
Yeah, it wasn't as big as I think maybe some expected. You know, I know some ushers and stuff, and they kind of didn't know, who or what was going to show up. If you compare it to the open practice they had last fall, right before the season started back in August, I think attendance was down. But this was one of two. They've got the spring game this coming Saturday at Michigan Stadium. I expect, turnout will be a little bit bigger. They didn't promote it a ton. It was kind of I think they announced it maybe a month prior. They didn't do a ton of promotion. So, no, it wasn't a big turnout, but it was a beautiful day. I will say that. It was darn near 70 degrees, and it was sunny. It was nice. It was nice football weather.
Well, let's get some of your observations from that practice, very limited practice, Aaron. But starting with the status of Michael Duan, he was out there with the team. Last week, I think it was at one of Jim's pressers. He mentioned that Michael Duan's and Donovan Peoples-Jones's injuries were maybe a bit more serious than they had originally thought, but he was dressed but did not participate in any drills, correct?
Yeah, well, he started early on, so he went through individual kind of warm-ups and stretching and whatnot, but as the practice went on, he didn't participate. I can remember, noting the final maybe hour and a half of the practice that he had his helmet off, he wasn't going through stuff, so it seems like he's able to, he was in uniform, but he wasn't able to go through the entire thing. So what to make of that, I guess, remains to be seen. It doesn't sound like he's practiced at all much this spring, so that might have been the first time he's kind of been, participating. But we'll see. You're right. You mentioned Jim didn't mention, I think last week in his press conference with us that, him and Peoples-Jones haven't practiced much. I guess the injuries to both are, Peoples-Jones was a groin injury. Duan was he tore his plantar fascia last fall in the Maryland game, I guess. But he ended up playing the rest of the season. I guess he re-aggravated it in the bowl game as well. So they're kind of smaller things that they're trying to get off them at this point. It sounds like they're trying to take it easy so far, at least this spring.
Yeah, no use losing anyone in spring practice. And as far as Duan's injury, I know he did get hurt last year in the Maryland game. Was that the type of injury that required any surgery in the offseason?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more staying off of it. I think they've kind of nursed it and everything else, but I think it's more staying off the foot because I think it's the base of your foot. I'm no medical expert, but it hurts. It's
Yeah.
one of those things where you can be in a lot of pain, but I don't believe it required a procedure.
Well, of course, fans want to get a look at the quarterbacks and see what's happening there. A lot of them got reps on Saturday, as you would expect in an open practice. And there's even, which is rare for Jim, a depth chart, sort of, for the quarterback position, isn't there?
Yeah, he's mentioned it a couple times. He's been pretty open about things this spring. It's been kind of nice to hear. He has said several times now that Shea Patterson is the number one at this point. Dylan McCaffrey, who tore his collarbone last fall, he did come back and he was practicing in the bowl prep. He is healthy, 100% healthy, and practicing again. He is the number two. And then Joe Milton, who got in a few games last year, he ended up obviously redshirting. He is the number three. After that is that gets more interesting note. I think most folks expected that order this spring. Number four, based on what I was watching on Saturday, was Cade McNamara. He was the 4-star recruit from Reno, Nevada that came in as part of this year's recruiting class. He enrolled early. He started classes back in January. He was number 4. And then Brandon Peters, the name that so many folks are familiar with. He ended up starting a handful of games a couple of years back in 2017. He was number 5, and then you had a couple of walk-ons after that.
I know a lot of fans are surprised that Brandon Peters is even still with the program, that maybe he should have seen the handwriting on the wall last year. Do you think it's still possible he could transfer out? Even, it seems to me this is sort of late in the game for next season to do that.
I do, and I don't have this confirmed because Brandon has not spoken to reporters now in about a year, but I'm under the assumption he may be graduating this spring. So it may just be a case of him kind of waiting out to the end of May and getting his degree and then choosing to move elsewhere. But as of right now, we've got no indication he's going to transfer. However, it wouldn't shock me. At this point, he's fallen on the depth chart. His name hasn't really come up much from Harbaugh and the coaching staff when it comes to the offense and the quarterbacks. So, yeah, I would not be surprised, in a few months to hear that he's gone.
Well, let's talk about the running back rotation or lack of running backs right now, Aaron.
Yeah.
Just a lot of injuries in the running back room. From what I understand, only 2 healthy scholarship backs right now, True Wilson and then redshirt freshman, Ben Van Sumeren. They were the only 2 scholarship backs getting reps on Saturday, weren't they?
You're right. Yeah, they've been hurt. That's the one position. Them the receivers really have kind of been ravaged by injuries this spring so far. You got obviously Christian Turner and Hassan Haskins. They've both been out. Turner's injury hasn't been disclosed at this point, but it sounds like Haskins is dealing with a meniscus injury. It sounds like he's been limited this fall. He's practiced a few times. They're hoping he can get out. He can practice for the final kind of few practices here down the stretch, but it sounds like he's going to require an off-season procedure to fix the meniscus. And then Zack Charbonnet, the 4-star recruit, who also enrolled early back in January from Southern California. I know they got high hopes for him. I think there's some folks are expecting him to contribute right away. He's been sidelined all spring with an injury as well that kind of dates back to his senior year of high school. I know he was supposed to play in the Under Armour All-American game back in January down in Orlando. He was invited and accepted and everything else, but he did not practice or play in that game due to that injury. He had a procedure as well when he got here back in January. So those 3 guys have largely been sidelined, and then you had some guys step up early in spring. I know Jim Harbaugh and the coaching staff were high on walk-on Lucas Andrighetto. He has since torn his ACL, so he's been sidelined as well. So Jay Harbaugh, the running backs coach there, is working with a few guys. But it sounds like the plan is to get most of those guys back healthy and available this fall, which is good. But you have to wonder, how that affects the install of this new offense. These guys are doing a lot of learning. True Wilson has talked about they're still learning the playbook and learning how to do things. So it's I think it'll slow some things in that regard. But you're right. They've been ravaged by injuries. I expect it sounds like everything will be kind of cleared up in the fall, though.
That one injury to Zack Charbonnet, that Jim talked about that. He's talked about it a couple of times since spring practice started. And you're right, they knew coming in he needed the procedure. He was going to have the procedure, and they wanted it done here in Ann Arbor so they could oversee that. They don't seem all too worried when they talk about him as far as making a strong recovery by fall practice.
No, that doesn't sound like it was entirely serious. I think it was more kind of preventative, that he probably could have played if they needed him to. But again, he's a first-year player. They don't want to risk further damage or anything worse. Because he's got 4 or 5 years ahead of him, depending on obviously his workload and whatnot. But they really like him. He's a big guy. He's quick. He's that I think that potential number 1 back that they would like to see here in a year or two. So they don't want to risk anything. I don't blame them. if they're going to do it, you might as well do it now and kind of get it out of the way for his future.
You mentioned Christian Turner and Hassan Haskins as two of the other backs that have injuries and are hobbled up, but we're not going to see them Saturday, are we?
No, it doesn't sound like it. We might see Haskins. Harbaugh was very optimistic about Hassan and thought maybe he might be able to get him back here down the stretch. It was possible. It doesn't sound like we'll see Turner, though. They've been kind of tight-lipped on his injury, so it sounds like it might be a little bit more serious. But I don't suspect so. I suspect you see a lot of True Wilson. You see a lot of Ben Van Sumeren, who Harbaugh's been high on as well this spring. And you got walk-on Julian Garrett and a couple of others. But no, I would not be surprised. Don't be surprised if you don't see Christian Turner on Saturday.
Well, last spring, as you and I know, Jim talked a lot about True Wilson, and we had to wonder until fall started what that was about. And True was a solid third back for us last year. But this spring, he's really going on about Ben Van Sumeren. How did he look to you?
Yeah, he looked okay. It was a lot of individual stuff, so it's hard to kind of gauge. But, he was one of those guys where him and Hassan both, Michigan coaching staff kind of asked to move from their defensive positions. Ben played a lot of linebacker last year. He kind of came in as a tight end. They kind of moved him to linebacker last year as a freshman. Then they saw this need at running back with so many guys out or injured or gone that they kind of had to use him. But he's got a big body. He almost looks like a fullback to me. He's a big, stout guy, so I think he'd be a good third down guy if they need him. But we'll see. Saturday's going to be interesting for some of these spots because you got a lot of position battles. You got a lot of guys who are kind of uncertain at this point. You've heard a lot of good things about, but until you kind of see them in action against, a full padded defense, it's tough to gauge.
And I know recently with the shortage of running backs, there's been some talk about Chris Evans possibly working his way back next fall. I don't know. No one knows what's been going on with that. Has there been any more talk that you've heard about that in the last few weeks?
Nothing discreet. It's Harbaugh's been asked about it. Jay Harbaugh's been asked about it. They haven't really commented much other than Jim saying that there is a possibility that he is back on this team. He hasn't offered a timeline up yet. It sounds like whatever the case is, and Chris hasn't returned my call, so I haven't got an interview with him, but it sounds like it's possible he's back. I would expect if that were to happen, something would move this summer. I would be shocked if he's back on the team by the end of the spring, but it would certainly help. Chris was obviously expected to be, the number one back coming into this year. He was obviously dismissed due to academic reasons, but at this point, Michigan, I know, is kind of planning on playing without him. If they get him back, it's probably great. It'd be great for them. They appreciate it. They would like it. But at this point, he's not practicing with the team. He's kind of on his own. But as far as I know, I think he's still in Ann Arbor. He's still hanging around. I think there's hope, and he hopes, to get back on the team. But like I said, at this point, they're kind of moving on without him.
With us on our Game Days segment this week, beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive talking Michigan football as we get ready for the spring game this coming weekend. Aaron, Jim is also very high on freshman wideout Mike Sanderstill, who a lot of people think was really undervalued or underrated as a high school player. How did he look to you on Saturday?
Yeah, he stood out to me. They only did about 10 or 15 minutes of 7-on-7, kind of those type of drills late because it was a non-padded, non-contact practice. There was a lot of individual stuff, a lot of position stuff. But Sanderstill's speed stood out to me late. They were doing kickoff returns and punt returns, and he's kind of in the mix for that type of stuff. And you saw his blazing speed down the field. He'd catch the ball, and he was quick. He's beating a lot of defenders. They did do, like I said, some brief 7-on-7. He caught up, I think, a pass or two. Looked good in that regard, and that's been the thing that the coaching staff, I think, has raved about him all spring, especially Jim Harbaugh, is his speed. He's got this blazing fast speed. He's beaten a lot of defenders. So I think that bodes well for the wide receiver group. They've been a group that's been, paraded now for a while now. There's hope that they kind of break out this year with this new up-tempo, fast-paced offense, and it sounds like he can be part of it. He's right now in spring one of the three starters at receiver. So they obviously liked him and his ability. You're right, he was kind of undervalued coming out of high school. I think he was a three-star recruit, kind of guy that kind of fell under the radar. Michigan got him from Virginia Tech, so he decommitted from Tech and then committed to Michigan back in, I think, November. So he was a late add to the class, but so far so good. We'll see. I think Saturday it's going to be interesting as long as they do some 7-on-7, 11-on-11. We're able to see some things against the defense, but so far so good. Offensive coordinator Coach Gattis put a video up on Twitter. I want to say a week or two ago with some of the work he was doing with the receivers, and it was a brief clip. It was only like 20, 25 seconds, but Sanders still stood out. He looked good, and I know Michigan, the coaching staff, is really, really high on him.
Well, just doubling back on the receiver injuries, Nico Collins still recovering from the off-season surgery. He hasn't worked out, period, has he?
Not as far as I know. Him or Donovan Peoples-Jones have both been out. Peoples-Jones has been dealing with the growing. It doesn't sound like it's too serious, but again, it's one of those things where I think you don't want to aggravate it. I think that's what Peoples-Jones is concerned about. As far as I know, it doesn't require surgery. However, Harbaugh, he had those interesting comments last week in his press conference about the injury to him and Domfort being more serious than he thought. I don't know exactly what that means, but Peoples-Jones, I think, is going to be fine. It's one of those things where he probably doesn't want to aggravate it, doesn't want to make anything more serious. And it is only spring ball, so there's plenty of time before the first game this fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ben Mason, Bench Mason, working on both sides of the ball, most notably with the defensive line, I think. I've been reading he's up to about 270 and playing some nose, which is small for nose, but he's a big, strong guy. Sounds like he's going to be a factor for Don Brown's defense somehow, doesn't it?
It sounds like it. We talked to him on, I think, Friday night, and he looked bigger and bulkier than I've seen him in the last couple of years. In fact, I think someone asked him how much weight he put on. He wouldn't tell us. He just said enough. So it sounds like, yeah, they're interested in using him on the defensive line. He is a guy that will go 100 miles an hour whenever you ask him to, and all game every day and all practice. So I think he probably helps them. Right now I think he's in the mix. Yeah, you're right. At nose or that tackle position. I think he's like number 2 at this point, kind of in the rotation. But yeah, I mean, he's taking to it. It sounds like he's going to play both sides of the ball. With Michigan's new offense, I think they're going to kind of de-emphasize the fullback spot, and Harbaugh doesn't want to take him off the field. But, I don't blame him. He's a hard worker, and he does what's asked of him. So they're trying to use him in different spots. I think they have him working with the tight ends a little bit too, and the running backs. But yeah, defensive line will be some place where I think you're going to see him this fall. He's kind of split his duties so far this spring. He'll start one practice with the offense, and then move the defense if it's needed, and then another practice he'll start with the defense and then kind of move the offense whenever it's needed. So he's been all over the place. I know he doesn't mind it. He always says that as long as he gets on the field and he's able to play, he doesn't care where he plays at. So, I expect to see him at the line. He's a big guy. He's gotten bigger. 270 sounds about right. Of all the players we've spoken to so far this spring, he was the most notable in terms of just gaining weight and gaining, size. So he's certainly prepared for it, and it sounds like he's doing pretty well.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that works out. I mean, we do need some depth on that defensive line this year. I mean, we've been hearing some other names that Don Brown's been talking about. He's been mentioning Donovan Jeter. I think a lot of us have been waiting to see if Donovan was going to make that leap now in his third year. And it appears he is going to be a factor, doesn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, with Domfort out most of spring, it's kind of giving Jeter the opportunity to step up and take that tackle spot. And so far, I guess he's looked really good. I think he's shed some weight. He's been in better shape. Coaching staff he's another guy the coaching staff has raved about pretty much since the beginning. So I know they like him there. And you've got Aiden Hutchinson and Carlo Kemp and Kwity Paye at the other end. So the inside is concerned. I know they got some depth at end. I think they like the depth they have there. But with Jeter playing well, and I know they expect Domfort to come back, so I think that'll help the depth on the inside. And then you've got the true freshman Mozzie Smith backing up the nose position too. So he's the one guy who's I think he's obviously a true freshman. He's still learning, and he's trying to lose some weight. The inside will be the concern this fall. If they have any injury there, it's going to be a concern. Jeter's looked good. He's one of the guys who's been talked about a ton. He's finally getting a shot. And that's one of the things, too. I think Michigan's done a very good job over the last couple of years of building depth along the line and, bringing guys along and guys that, excel in their junior and senior seasons. And it sounds like Donovan Jeter's going to have an opportunity to do so this fall.
Have Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson pretty much locked down the starting spots for the defensive ends this year?
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. At least the coaching staff the way they've spoken about both of them, it sure sounds like it. We saw Kwity Paye a lot last year with Rashawn Gary out due to injury. Aiden Hutchinson got a lot of playing time as a true freshman. Those two seem to be the obvious front runners at this point. Behind them, they've got Luigi Villain. He's been obviously injured the last 2 years, hasn't played a ton, but it sounds like he's healthy and doing pretty well. You got Julius Welchkoff, the German recruit from a couple of years back. He was a true freshman last year, didn't play at all. And then you got obviously Michael Dana, the graduate transfer from CMU, coming in as well. I expect him to, at the very least, be in the rotation, if not start, get some starting time at defensive end. It's going to depend on, obviously, how things shake up, this fall in camp. Dana won't get here until the summer, so he hasn't been practicing at all this spring just yet.
Well, a lot of people watching with interest what's going on at the linebacker spots, too. Of course, Ross, Don Brown just loves him, talks about what a hitter he is. Devin Gill is another player he's talking about. What do you think it looks like for the linebacking positions right now, Aaron?
Yeah, you kind of nailed it. We asked Don Brown about Devin Gill last week, I think it was, and he said Devin Gill is probably one of the more impressive players this spring, just in terms of being in shape and conditioning. He likes the way he came back from the off-season conditioning program. I know he's been sidelined the last few practices due to illness, but he is the front runner right now to start at the will linebacker spot. Josh Ross, again, he's the favorite to start at Mike to kind of replace Devin Bush. He's been sidelined, I guess. He was sidelined last week, I guess, with the strained hamstring, but he's expected back soon as well. And then you've got Josh Uche at the Sam. With Gill and Ross kind of missing the last few weeks. I know Jordan Anthony's stepped up. He's been playing at Mike, and I know Cam McGrone's been playing at the Will and Mike. So you've got some of those younger guys who are stepping in as well. Jordan Anthony was a guy who Brown's mentioned, even going back to the bull prep last December. He's liked the way he's improved. He thinks he's ready to take the next step. So that linebacker position is deep. You've got several guys there who can play right away. But yeah, Ross is a guy who the coaching staff has been high on since the beginning of the spring. I've been asking about him. They think he can kind of fill most of what Devin Bush provided last year. I don't think he's going to do it all. Obviously, Bush is a special player, All-American. Player you're not going to see every time, or you're not going to see every year. Mm-hmm. But they've been talking a lot about Ross and going back to last year, so they like what he can bring. He's ready to play. He played a lot last year, so I think they'll be fine linebacker.
And then in the back end, a lot of youth in the secondary. No shortage of talent, no question about that. And despite a few injuries on the back end right now, Don Brown seems to really like the players he's working with, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He made a comment last week to us about the speed. He thinks this group might be faster than last year's group, which is impressive considering the lack of name talent. Obviously got Lavert Hill back, but he too has been sidelined this spring with an injury. He had an off-season procedure, but it's helped some of these guys, allowed some of these guys to kind of step up. You got Ambry Thomas right now with the right corner spot. Vincent Gray, the redshirt freshman, he's at the left corner spot. You've got Hunter Reynolds and Jalen Kelly Powell backing them up at this point. Brad Hawkins is at the nickel right now, with Kelly Powell also backing him up. And then the safety, Josh Metellus, is back for a senior season. He brings that veteran leadership to the secondary. And then Jamerick Woods, he's the other safety right now that's starting. So yeah, it's an interesting group. Some of these guys have been around a while. Like Jamerick Woods and Kelly Powell now are kind of entering their third season. So they've been in the system now a couple of years. They know what Don Brown expects. They've taken strides. They've gotten better. Now it's, I think, more getting time on task, like Jim Harbaugh likes to say, and more experience. And I think they'll be fine. Don Brown's defense is a system. We all know he's real consistent. He knows what he wants. They play a certain way, and I think they'll be just fine this fall.
Another notable battle going on behind the scenes is the place-kicking job. Field goals, extra points. Jake Moody, we saw at the end of last season, looked surprisingly good. And, of course, Quinn Nordine has that big leg that we've seen the last couple of years. It's going to be interesting to see. Jim says that's neck and neck right now, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, said that. And this is interesting because they've got got two kickers on scholarship, which is rare. Sometimes you see one school or one team with one on scholarship. Both these guys are on scholarship. So, at this point, I think they've got to settle on one. Quinn obviously started last year, like you said, kind of went cold there. Jake Moody turned it on late, but yeah, Harbaugh said it's been neck and neck. They're both been pretty consistent this spring. From the numbers he told us the other day, it sounded like each of them had missed one field goal all spring. They've been charting them every practice. So it sounds like the person that obviously kicks the better is going to get the starting job come August 31st against Middle Tennessee State. But I wouldn't be surprised if this goes into the fall, too. These guys are competitive. We all know about Nordine and his competitive nature. Moody, I think, surprised some folks last year. But the kicking job is so, it's interesting because it's so, psychological. You have one bad game or you have a few bad kicks and things turn south. So it's nice to have both of them on the roster, but at the same time, you can only have one guy kick the football. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if either one gets it. It's going to probably come down to a close race. Dean obviously has experience, but Moody at the same time was really hot last year and was really consistent. So, and that's what they're looking for. They want consistency, and they want someone who can put the ball through the uprights, every kick.
And what about the punting game, Aaron? This spring, I have not read much about what's going on there as far as competition.
Well, yeah, I don't think there is. Will Hart sounded like the guy. He had a really good year last year, and it was interesting because if going back to 2017, Will Hart lost the job to Brad Robbins. But after the year I think Hart had, I'd be remiss to say that there's any competition there. He was, he was National Punter of the Year finalist. I think he was number one in the Big Ten. He's the top nationally. He's the guy at this point, barring any, sort of off-season injury or some struggles. I think he's going to be the guy.
Well, despite the new coaches, a lot of injuries, there's a new offense being put in, et cetera, a lot going on, especially behind the scenes of spring practice. From a news perspective, though, Aaron, very tough to cover. There's just really not much news that gets out, is there?
No, I mean, and like I said earlier, Harbaugh's been a little bit more open this spring than he has the last couple of years. We've talked to him twice now. He's on his podcast regularly. They did have this open practice the other day. But, going into the open practice this past Saturday, we knew the depth chart. Harbaugh told us last week, he kind of broke it down position by position. So there wasn't a ton going on, a ton to learn from it, a ton to glean from it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's difficult to kind of gauge some of these guys because they're going through individual drills and position specific things. So it's hard to gauge things. But, it's been fine. It's kind of like most spring. You don't want to get too high on things. And you don't want to get too low on things. It's one of those things, especially this spring. They're learning a new offense, they're learning a new system, a lot of learning going on, so it's, I think more things will be hashed out this fall. I think fall camp will be more of a determination of, where this team is and status. But no, so far, other than the injuries, which is a big deal because I think it does slow the install, like I said earlier, at least offensively. They've been fine. They've got more depth at certain positions, some of the key positions than previous years, which is good, especially offensively. So it's, I think, a more well-rounded team than it was last season. But in terms of, success or predictions, I guess we'll probably hold those off till the fall.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the fans, though, of course, would like to get a glimpse of Josh Gattis' new offense, speed and space, yada, yada, yada. I don't think Saturday you're going to see anything at all, though, are we?
Yeah, I don't know. I still don't know a format for Saturday, so I guess until we find that out, we'll see. If they do a lot of 7-on-7, 11-on-11, we might see some. They did do a little bit on this past Saturday, like I said, the final 10 minutes or so, but it was, again, no non-contact, kind of like flag football style. They did, they were running routes and they weren't being touched. But there was some crossing routes, a lot of screens, a lot of stuff in motion. So it sounds like a regular, spread style offense. I don't think there's a ton to hide necessarily. But at the same time, they probably don't want to give away personnel groupings and guys they plan to use in certain situations. So it'll probably be a stripped down, limited thing. But it is football. It's April. It's basketball. Michigan basketball's been knocked out, so I think folks are hoping to see or glean anything they can. So it'll be an opportunity. It'll be nice to see just kind of things work out, and you can see some of the quarterbacks that you probably won't see the rest of the season. So it'll be an interesting time.
Well, I guess all we really need to know about the offense is, again, you've had more access to the players and the coaching staff the last couple of weeks, and the guys seem to really, the offensive players like this offense, don't they?
Yeah, it seemed like it fits their personnel better. I can remember talking to Shea Patterson back in January at the U.S. Army All-American Bowl down in San Antonio, and he told me flat out, he's like, we need to change things up. They felt like the offense was times too conservative last year. It didn't fit what they wanted to do or were maybe good at doing. So it sounds like, Jim Harbaugh made the necessary changes. He brought in the type of guy that I think fits well with this team. It sounds like a lot of players do like Josh Gattis. He's a high-energy guy. We talk about speed and space, and he talks a mile a minute sometimes too. He's an engaging guy. He's fast. He's interesting, but it's the type of offense I think Michigan can flourish in, especially Shea Patterson, their quarterback. It's just a matter of how long the install is going to take. If this thing is still going on midway through fall camp, then who knows how it's going to turn out. But right now they're in install mode. I know Gattis wants to have it all in by the end of spring. But like we've said, earlier, there's so many injuries and so many guys sitting out that I think that'll be difficult to do.
Well, this Saturday, of course, the spring game, and for nothing else, it's a chance to get out and what's hopefully a decent weather day, or at least good football weather, and see this team one more time before fall. So, beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive joining us. It's been a long time since Haven't had you on, Aaron, since the season, so as always, we appreciate you taking the time to join us, and we look forward to, not long from now, getting back together and talking about the upcoming season.
Absolutely, Mike. Thanks.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, Red Hot Softball made it 15 in a row this weekend by sweeping Indiana at home. All-American Megan Bobian picked up all 3 wins, improving her record to 15-3 on the season. This weekend, it's on the road for 3 against Ohio State down there in Columbus. We are 27-10 overall, a perfect 9-0 in Big Ten play so far this season. Coach Bakich and baseball are keeping pace with softball on the victory trail. We took 2 of 3 from Minnesota up there over the weekend. We're at home for a pair with Indiana State midweek, and then travel with softball down to Columbus for a weekend series with the Buckeyes. We are 22-8 overall, 4-1 in Big Ten play. The spring game, or practice, whichever it is set to get started at 5 p.m. on Saturday. If you're headed to the game, the weatherman says it's going to be dry Saturday, with cloudy skies, gusty winds, and temperatures in the mid-40s, so all in all, pretty good football weather. That will do it for another show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. If you're headed out to the spring game, enjoy. We'll see you right back here next week. Until then, take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!